Today we talked about our expectations of God and sort of examined the life of John the Baptist. John is someone who's been devoted to the kingdom that is to come. He's been adhering to the idea that Jesus actually is that person. And yet we see him when he's in prison ask Jesus through his disciples, he says, "Are you the one, the Messiah, or should we expect somebody else?" And I think that's sort of a question that a lot of us ask when the God that we get isn't the one that we expect. And specifically in John's life, he's looking around and seeing that the Messiah that was to deliver them is allowing Pharisees and Sadducees and the Roman government to thrive while his own followers are either in prison or facing the lash or hiding in their homes for fear of the religious leaders. And so we really considered the question, what do you do when there's suffering going on and you know it's not right and your friends know it's not right, even the people that don't really root for you know it's not right, and yet God, who seems like the one person who could stop it, doesn't intervene. And so what we examined actually was that Jesus often enters into our suffering, not alleviating it, but even in the middle of it, opening a way of holiness. So even those things that are unjust, whether they're happening to us or happening in the world around us or happening to someone that we love, even those things, even the people that perpetuate injustice, the people who are self-righteous, the people who are sellouts, even those people who appear to succeed, Jesus opens the way of holiness and invites even those people in, knowing that if they walk the way of holiness that is opened by Jesus' humanity, they can be made fully new. In the same way, as we go through suffering, God invites us to experience a new way of being, experience a new way of being human, a new way of approaching Him, and a new way of believing that Jesus will deliver us, even if it's not what we prayed for. That God makes possible the way of holiness to us in the suffering, not just around it, that His invitation is open to approach the same situations and to, like John the Baptist, see what God's doing, even if it seems meager to us, seems too small to adequately match the complexity of our life's problems. Jesus invites us even in those moments to look at the small ways that He shows up and to say, that has to be enough, instead of giving Him a yardstick that He needs to measure up to in our lives. And so if you're in a group this week, or if you're even talking about this around a dinner table, some questions we'd love for you to consider are just the three actually that we talked about at the end of service today. First, where has God most disappointed you recently? There are things in your life maybe that you've been praying for a long time that seem very much like the mission of God to make right, and yet they're wrong. Maybe around your groups, be honest about some of those ways in which God has disappointed you. God has not been who you thought He would be. The second question is, what in my life can I name as enough of God's presence? Maybe there are things in your life that haven't been made right, and even on the margins, there are places that God is showing up. They seem meager, they seem small. Maybe it's Him, maybe it's not. But the invitation of Jesus might be, I think, this week, to name those places, though they're not what we hope for, though they don't stop our suffering, to in that suffering name those things as enough. So the second question is, what is God doing in your life that you need to name as enough? The third question is, how can you walk in the way that Jesus has opened? The good news of this message, actually, and the good news that John the Baptist hears is that even though he doesn't get the answer he wanted, he gets invited into the way of holiness even in the middle of suffering and injustice. And so the good news for us is that we can actually walk that way too. And so in your life, what is it that God might be calling you to do or to believe or to discuss with a friend that would be the next right thing in stepping forward into the way of holiness that Jesus invites us to? Is it lamenting and being honest with God about the ways in which He's let you down? Is it going to counseling and processing through with a trusted voice the suffering and the hurt and how to be a holy and beloved person in the middle of that? Is it taking the first steps towards forgiving someone who has wronged you, even if they don't express repentance or a desire for reconciliation? Maybe you don't need to talk to them, but just processing through what forgiveness would look like to set you and that other person free. Those are the three questions. 1, where has God most recently disappointed you? 2, what is God doing in your life that you need to name as enough? And 3, what might it look like today and the next week for you to walk in the way that Jesus has opened? We would love for you to consider those with your group this week.